What's up, everybody? You're listening to Juicy Radio. I'm your host, Tony Bacigalupo. Happy 2017. In this episode, I'm so excited to be catching up with Brad Krauskopf, the founder of what is now called Hub Australia. They have locations in Melbourne, Sydney, and Adelaide. So many members, so much space, and really built on an incredible culture, just an amazing network that they've done there. They've really built something that's more than a workspace. They've built a professional network, but I don't want to get too ahead of myself. You'll hear Brad talk about that and so much more in this episode. I actually got to visit Brad and his space when it was Hub Melbourne in Melbourne, Australia, with Alex Hillman back in 2013, in February of 2013. And we were there for the first Australian coworking conference. And I have to say, it was just so amazing to visit a new continent, see what was going on there, and see that this was obviously something that was going to grow. And so at that point, Brad had a space of, probably only about 5,000 or 6,000 square feet, but he had like 400 members. And I remember it was completely mind-blowing to me that he could have so many members. And the reason was because he had set this thing up to be more of a support network. And so most of those members were people who weren't actually working in the space, but who were making use of the network to find people to hire, find people to help them with whatever they were working on, whatever. And now they're in so many more locations, so many more members, and another location coming soon. And so one of the things that I really wanted to get out of this conversation was a sense from Brad of, first of all, how the heck he did all of this, but also how he was able to create something that people perceived as being valuable enough to want to join, even if they didn't want to make use of the co-working space, because that's a nut that's really hard for some people to crack. But then also just rewinding a bit to how he managed to actually get all of this started and lay that foundation. And of course, we want to get a quick little preview for Juicy Australia plans coming up. So in any case, super excited to introduce you all to Brad and all that and more in this Juicy Radio episode 9. Brad, one of the things that I have been so impressed by with what you've done in Hub Melbourne, and now you have a few other locations, is the sheer number of members that you have. Can you tell me a little bit about how you were able to build that network and kind of how people perceive membership in your space? Because I can't imagine you have enough room to house all of them in one shot.
Look, we try and provide value to our members beyond space. Ultimately, Hub Australia focuses on growing businesses. So to that end, diversity is something that we've always hung our hat on. And, for instance, if you to really add value through diversity, you actually do need to have a lot of members. Otherwise, you're going to have, just 10 different members, but you've only got 10 of them. If we can have 100 members from 10, 20 different backgrounds, we can really start building up that value. We've certainly seen that there's a huge amount of trade between our members. There's a huge amount of learning going on between our members. And one of the things that I'm loving as well is the social connections and friendships. So, the amount of people that I know that are even alumni members, but still maintain great friendships. So over time, we've built up the community. And that's how, we have this really large community. It's around about 1,000 members now nationally, which is, it's a lot when you look at the global, what's an average per space.
Okay, so you have, you're saying in the neighborhood of about 1,000 members across 3 locations, correct?
That's right.
And how many square feet roughly are those locations?
So we've got one 40,000 square feet, one 12,000 and one 8,000. And then we're looking to add another large one this year in Sydney.
Okay, and the reason I'm asking is because, again, what I'm noticing is that you have far more members than you would have if you only had members that really wanted to come in and just work in the space. So what you're selling is not just access to workspace, but you're selling access to the network, the platform, the services that are associated with being a part of the community.
It's a national business community that people can engage with. We've got lots of different memberships. So, for want of a better description, it's customized. It's a bespoke offering where people can choose which membership suits their needs, and indeed which parts of the business community they want to connect with, depending on what stage of the of growth their company is in.
Okay, and could you give me a little bit of insight into how that breaks down? What's kind of the entry level membership for someone just getting started?
Sure. So we do have what we call a Connect membership, which is only $30 a month. That doesn't give you any space usage. We have a casual and a frequent membership, which utilize a hot desk scenario where people pick their seat when they come in, and then we have a dedicated desk and private offices ranging from 1 all the way up to 20 people.
Got it.
Yeah, and so very much, particularly that 1 person to 5 person business is certainly the most popular entry point to the hub. But then certainly, we have much larger businesses working with us. And one of the key things that I've seen happening is that more and more members now tell me that the key reason that they stay at the hub and they join the hub is the ability to attract and retain staff.
Really? So they see it as a way of recruiting talent?
Absolutely. So I think, when I think of small businesses, a lot of people love the idea of small business, the authenticity, the training options, the ability to work towards the goal where you really feel like you're making an impact and getting the team towards that goal. But what people also miss is the social connections that being part of a really big team bring, and the learning opportunities in that excitement of being part of something bigger. And I think that's a really interesting intersection that where co-working's gone not just from freelancers, but also into those growing businesses where people can now choose to work for a small business, but be a part of something much bigger, and that being the co-working community.
That's terrific. So it sounds like the members that you have there are really understanding that membership in the Hub Australia network is about the value that you're getting from the connections you're making, the sense of belonging to something bigger, feeling like you have a support system around you. These are all the kinds of things that I think a lot of us are trying to communicate in our communities, but maybe having a little bit of trouble with in some cases. And so I'm wondering what your secret is, if anything, because this is not a lot of people have tried to crack, but you seem to have cracked it really well. So I'm curious, what's your secret?
Try again. Look, there's 100 versions of the way to do this that, haven't worked for us over the years. I think we've got a good marriage at the moment of recognizing where we can add the most value, and that's to these growing teams. It might be that you've got we still have a lot of one-person businesses, but they're looking to grow. They're looking at how can I make an impact? How can I make impact for our customers, grow their profits, grow their revenues, and grow the the learning opportunities for their staff. And look, we've got a great team on board. But it's taken us a long time to get there. I think it's actually the 7th year that I've been in co-working, and I feel like we're only just starting to pull it together.
Okay, so let's go back to the ways that don't work. Maybe we could kind of trace it back from there. What have you tried in the past that you found hasn't worked? Maybe some of the top lessons you learned, things you thought were going to work or you wanted to work, but it didn't work out, and that kind of helped to educate you as to where that better answer might be.
Yeah, sure thing. Look, One of the key things that did change in the hub model over the last couple of years is we have much larger spaces. We tried to achieve a huge amount of things in a very small container. When you're trying to do that, essentially there's just not enough. There's not enough gas in the tank. So either people burn out, you run out of money, members come in and you've sold them on a dream, but you're not delivering on it. So, you've got to make sure that if you're selling something big, that you've actually got enough juice in the tank to actually do that. Now, that could come through going and raising crazy amounts of financing. It could also come through making sure that your business model is right, working out how many members do I actually need to live up to the promise that I'm selling. So we've got bigger spaces. What that means is that we have a huge range now of different work options, which when we say we can appeal to a growing business, you really can come to us with anything from 1 to 20 people. And at any point in time, you're only paying for however much space and however much access you need to the community. So that was a big one, making sure that the dream matches the size of the car that you're driving.
Okay, so it sounds like one of the things that you learned was just to deliver on what you're able to with what you have, and not to try to overextend yourself based on what you've built so far. And so one of the ways you've addressed that is just adding more square footage, which has allowed you to do more, have more economies of scale, have a larger network, have more staff, all of those things.
That's right.
But at the same time, I imagine that there was a time when you didn't have those larger spaces and you just had to manage the expectations in terms of what you were selling. And you still managed to do that to the tune of a pretty robust membership. As I recall, when I visited you in 2013 for the first Juicy Australia conference, you had one location in Melbourne and you had many, I think 400 members, some large number of members. So it sounds like I'm trying to kind of rewind the tape a little bit here, because I imagine a lot of the people listening, are nowhere near where you're at now in terms of membership or space, but maybe could be making decisions a little bit earlier in their process to help set them up to get you to that place,
That's a good one, Trey. Look, you are right. We did have 400 members, but if I'm not wrong, I think probably 200 of them were the $30 membership. So actually, what you do is you've got to grow at the pace that you can. If anything, we had more members than we had staff and revenue to support. So what also came on the back off the back of that, Tony, would have been a lot of staff turnover, a lot of people burning out, a lot of just generally, look, how do we make this work, and constant trial and error. To lead that into what's one of the other key things, you've got to make sure that whatever that core driver of your revenue and profitability is that can have you stand on your own 2 feet. If you're relying on 10 different sources of revenue, which means you're offering at a minimum 10 different services, that's really hard for a small business to wrap its head around.
Yeah, I see what you mean, because the issue with having that really wide base at that low price is that there's a lot of administrative energy being put into onboarding, offboarding, answering questions, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and emotional energy. Like Tony, it's like building a community. It's hard. So yeah, sure, 400 people means 400 people to administer. It actually is 400 relationships to nurture. Now that's a lot of relationships. So you need a lot of staff, and that's you got to make sure you got a solid business model behind it.
And with churn as well, it's not 400, because in the course of a year, that's actually, 600, 800. And if you're counting prospective members that you put energy into recruiting, come to events, you're talking about thousands of people every year.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Okay, yeah. So let's say I am running a little co-working space and I want to build a sustainable business in my co-working space, I have a few ways of approaching it. One way that I know doesn't work is to just kind of keep everything the same, unless there is some other element. So if if you want to stay small, you basically have to have some other kind of a business model, like a consultancy or, some other way to bring in more revenue. But if you want to really dedicate to co-working, then you have to go one of a few routes. You have to either scale up, you have to develop maybe educational programming or incubator programming or some other diversified revenue, or you have to kind of expand what it is to be a member of your community, to be more of this network like what you've built. And I happen to be a big fan of your model because I think that ultimately the importance of co-working is less in the office space. It's really the least interesting part to me, and more in the social connections and the help that people can give each other in building their businesses. And so I guess what I'm wondering is if someone's listening to this who's running a small space and they're thinking about, gosh, Brad's kind of going a direction that I'd love to see myself go in my city, what advice would you give them now in terms of what steps they should take to set themselves up correctly to really thrive in that direction?
Sure. Look, make a commitment to pick one of those routes and do it amazingly well. I think, one of the things that with co-working, and when we were in I said I've been in this for 7 years, Tony. I know you have been in it for even longer than that. There was this huge period there where, we were all finding our way. And to a large extent, we all got through it by essentially doing a lot for our members. Co-working is actually an industry now. It is something that is recognised in the mainstream, and when you're in the mainstream, it's not like you operate in some parallel universe. The rents are the same. There's not people getting government grants. There's not people being happy to pay more or being able to, run the kitchen. At the end of the day, we all end up we're all operating on a pretty level playing field now. So if you're not particularly good at something, you'll fall behind. So whether it is, really focusing on scaling up the offering, whether it's focusing on the training, whether it is to just be simply the absolute best place for startups looking for Series B funding, you've got to have something to hang your hat on. That would be the key bit. And then also as a founder of that co-working space, take stock on why you got into it. For instance, my family background was they were in hotels. So this concept of having a big lease and being in hospitality where, ultimately it's about creating that great experience for somebody every day. Going in to sign a 40,000-foot lease, it still, it scares the bejesus out of me. It's a big thing, but it's not foreign to what I expected in my entrepreneurial life. Somebody who was a freelancer and maybe got into it purely for the way that they could create learning opportunities and, essentially run a global one-person business. They might look for something a lot different and actually want to have a 5,000-foot space where they just operate the most amazing value for particular digital freelancers doing something. Match whatever co-working community and space you want to create to the entrepreneurial life that you wanted to lead, because there's very different versions depending on what type of co-working you sign up to be great at.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm noticing here in Boulder that there are a whole lot of co-working spaces that you probably can't even find because they don't identify as such, but they're essentially the offices of design agencies, marketing agencies, things like that. And they're literally just these little office spaces, and they have a few extra desks, and they kind of run it as we do this great work in this other realm, but then we also share the space with other people, and that's a perfectly valid way of doing it too. So I think that's sage advice to kind of tune into what feels right for you and your disposition, and go towards that, because there are a lot of different ways to approach it. I dig that. So, Brad, I got one other question for you. I know that you have to run. Okay, so I'm real curious about this, because it sounds like you've developed a really, really great culture of people that really understand what it means to be a part of a thing where they, you get something from it by putting something into it, right? And that relationships are valuable and important. And so I'm wondering, if we rewind the tape all the way back to the beginning, how did you instill that culture from the beginning? What was it like for the earliest members, and to what extent what did you do at that point to instill the values that have, allowed this culture to blossom into what it's become at such a scale today?
Yeah, look, it's a good question. I think there's a strong. You got to try and take care of if you try and take care of your members, you can. I guess you almost set a tone. So there's a tone at the hub, and there's a feeling at the hub. It certainly has over the years evolved as our members' companies have evolved. For instance, we when we used to set up a space, it was all open plan. What our members were asking for back then is different to what they're asking for now. Now they are actively asking us for more offices and a more diversity of different working environments. Now, as that's evolved, probably the biggest thing I'd say about the culture is we've also had to recognise that as the space has evolved, you need to adapt the way that you nurture that culture. Certainly, we found that we need to figure out how to make sure that each interaction we have with a member it's probably more. It's not like it's scripted, but it's deliberate, in that each time that you engage with a member, you've got 400 other members that you're also looking after and nurturing at each site and servicing. So you can't spend half an hour with every member every day. Yeah. So what you do is you need to have a purposeful engagement, a deliberate one. And if we can actually in that engagement with somebody, set a culture that when that member leaves, they'll also mirror that culture, then suddenly it's not just up to our staff to be the only people that are setting the tone and the culture. Suddenly every member is being an example to the new members, holding older members to account, and just setting that, hang on, we're about growing businesses here. What is the best way that we can help each other do that?
Well, that sounds like it sounds like a wise way of approaching it, honestly, just because making those interactions quality interactions is what kind of weaves the bonds that make real relationships between people, and that's what I think can help to last, and also show other people, hey, this is the kind of a community we have. We actually really do care about each other because we've bothered to kind of really get to know each other. Okay, I know you have to run, but I do have one last quick one, which is what kinds of plans are coming together for future conference activity in Australia?
So I think it's time for another GCUC in Australia. The plan is to do that in June of this year in Melbourne. We've been running a conference every 2 years now, of which you were out for our first conference in 2013. Then we joined up with GCUC in 2015 and did a conference there in Sydney. And now the plan is to do it all over again in Melbourne.
Awesome. Well, I really hope that I figure out a way to come join you for it. And I'm so excited. Congratulations for all of the great work that you've done. Best of luck with the new location and with the next conference. And I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today.
Hey, appreciate your time and everything you do in co-working, Tony. I do hope I see you in June in Melbourne.
Awesome. All right. Thanks so much, Brad.
Thank you.
Awesome. So great chatting with Brad. I feel really inspired. I hope you do too. Really feel like, it's so important that no matter what you're doing in the co-working world, that you get a strong sense of what it is that you want to do, what direction you want to go with your community. There are a lot of different ways to do this thing. And as Brad pointed out, there are proven models now. There weren't proven models a few years ago, but there are now. And so there are people you can follow, models you can follow. And you really, if you don't have a strong long-term plan yet, let's get one going for you. And if you want to talk about it, shoot me an email, tony@nwc.co. That's November Whiskey Charlie.CharlieOliver, tony@nwc.co. And of course, find out about the upcoming GCUC events happening now all over the world this year. I am excited for the one that is coming up in May. I hear it's going to be in the East Coast, maybe in the vicinity of New York. If it is, I'll be excited because that's where I'm from, so I get to visit the fam too. Maybe I can have mom and dad come see me speak for once. That would be awesome. Anyway, hope to see all of you who are listening at a future GCUC event. And I hope that this conversation with Brad was super valuable to you. As always, if you have any thoughts or feedback about GCUC Radio, about this show, about the interview, or anything you just want to chat with me about, I've already told you my email address. You can find me at TonyBeGood on Twitter as well. And until next time, keep being awesome.